Liberty lovers, and welcome to the Liberty Mike podcast, broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the heart of Dixie. I am Michael, and I am here with Liberty Larry.
How's it going?
I'm okay. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm all right. It's been a long couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I'm glad the holidays are over.
Yeah. Well, we're actually kind of late getting started here. Like, we've just been sitting talking for like a half an hour because we haven't talked since before Christmas, or barely talked since before Christmas. So sorry we didn't have a after Christmas show. That just didn't work out.
It wasn't in the cards. Turned out the holidays were a little more hectic for me than I had anticipated.
Yeah. There's a lot going on this side too. Yeah. I have I learned today. All right, so I have problems with the dryer in my house.
You've always had problems with the dryer in your house.
Yeah,
as long as you've lived here. It's poor design is what it comes down to.
I agree. It just, the exhaust line is too long. But my previous dryer was a real problem, and then like 4 or 5 years ago I got a new dryer, and I had very little problem with that.
Yeah.
It still takes too much time to dry anything, but whatever. So I washed a blanket last week and it came out and everything was fine. And then I washed towels, and like I ran the towels for like 2.5 hours in the dryer, and it wouldn't come dry.
They would have air dried quicker than that.
No, not really, because I tried that next. Of course, I had them hung over everything in the house.
It still didn't work.
It just took like a day.
Yeah.
But
after summertime, you throw them on the line out in the yard and have them done in an hour.
Yeah, you remember what last weekend was like here?
Yeah,
though, right?
I said in the summertime.
Okay, yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah. So but the last time I checked, I was like, oh, it's just not even warm.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? And so I've had this problem with my previous dryer, like, over and over again. I replaced the heating element I don't know how many times.
It's probably related to that long exhaust pipe you've got.
It might be.
Overwork.
It shouldn't work that way. Like, the air moves actually pretty good. Like, I've checked it. Like, the air moves pretty good. There might be it's probably less efficient than it should be, but it moves pretty good. And whenever it's not moving pretty good, then I actually like literally duct tape a leaf blower to the inside and like
shoot it out.
Yeah. So I just assumed that it would be the heating element again, and because when I took apart my dryer, I couldn't find anything else obviously wrong, and I ordered a heating element because they're inexpensive.
Yeah,
they're like $25-$30.
Yeah.
And so I finally got the heating element, and I took the old one out, put the new one in, and it didn't help. And so I replaced the thermal fuse, because if that goes bad, then it could just like always be telling it to shut off, you know. Yeah. Still no heat.
Oh, no.
So I called a guy.
Yeah.
I said, this is what I've done. I also got offered a job by that guy.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. He's like, oh, wow, we should hire you. Like, most people can't get any of that stuff done. You did all that yourself? Yes. Yeah, I did. I'm old enough to be of a generation where we still understand how things work.
Yeah, and attempt to fix them when they break.
It's not just magic to me. I remember when I was little, I used to take things apart and put them back together, like telephones and stuff like this. Anyway. Yeah. So he didn't even really get to the dryer. He's like, "Oh, let me check your outlet."
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he checks the outlet, and I have, now I didn't know this term. I have a what is, now I can't think of it. A floating neutral or a floating common, or a floating ground. That's the other thing. Anyway, what it means is that there's some wires in the wall somewhere crossed.
Oh, okay.
And he says, you need like a real electrician out here to do this work. And he's like, that's not something you want to try and do yourself. And I said, no, of course not. I'm terrified of electricity. So,
and so as soon as he walked out the door, you pulled up YouTube, right?
No, no. As soon as he walked out the door, I called everybody I knew that was a contractor. Oh, well, no, not quite. I guess that's not true. But a couple
you
of
started
people,
down the list,
yeah,
though, right?
Exactly, and said, "Who can you recommend that I can get out here today?" Because the guy's like, "This is a fire risk."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I can shut off the breaker." He's like, "No, I mean it's crossing some other wire. It'll still be live. Like the only way to make sure that you have no risk is to shut it off at the meter." And I'm like, "Well, I want electricity in my house. I'm not ready to go back to the 19th century here."
I went through this with water a few weeks ago, having to shut off at the main every time. Like that's it's not fun.
So I did finally get somebody that could be here on Monday, which isn't what I wanted, but oh well. And I shut off the breaker and so pay attention. Keep your nose open for smoke.
I'll pay attention. I didn't realize this house was a fire hazard.
Apparently. Well, the only place that I've had any kind of malfunction is at the dryer, so it's probably behind the dryer. Probably shutting off that circuit actually did do it.
Yeah.
But not necessarily.
But your guy didn't seem so sure about that.
Yeah, well, because it could be anywhere. Like the other, the first contractor guy that I talked to also said that he is like, it's probably affecting other outlets. First thing he told me was to unplug all my computers and televisions.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, it can burn out these circuits if you leave it plugged in. Well, I got everything plugged in through a surge protector, so I figure if it burns out anything, that's what it'll burn out. But
yeah.
And I don't know how to function. I was working from home today. I can't function without a computer. Oh well.
Lord.
Anyway, so yeah, New Year's starting off right.
Yeah, right. Getting a roaring start here.
Yeah. My mom had a leak in her roof. Although that I guess technically happened right before New Year's, but
still kicking it off right.
Yeah. A lot of stuff going on.
A lot of stuff going on in the world too.
I suppose so. The New Orleans thing.
Yeah.
This is what you wanted to talk about, or felt like we needed to. You're probably right.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of information here still, but it was one of those, what I think of at this point as European-style terrorist attacks, driving a truck through a barrier. And
when people's been asking me about it the past few days, I mean, that's basically what I've been telling them. It's like, look, this has been happening in Europe for a while. Like, this isn't something that's super new. It's new to us because I don't know. I can't think of an incident where this has happened in the U.S.
Yeah.
I could be missing something, but
I don't know of it happening before. There's also the Las Vegas attack.
Same day.
Yeah. This is a weird place to interrupt and throw this in there.
Okay.
But I want to thank a friend of mine who provided the whiskey that we're drinking tonight.
Oh yeah,
because I know it's the only bottle she got.
Yeah.
And it's her favorite release from this distillery, and she gave it to me for Christmas, and I didn't quite realize how significant that was when I was with her.
In real time.
I want to say now, like, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a good drink. Like I say, I'm definitely digging it.
Yeah, you're drinking it faster than I do, and I am. And that never happens.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
So it's good.
But okay, so back to the terrorist attacks. It made me think of it because the first one's on Bourbon Street, and what do you associate with Bourbon Street? Like drinking.
Yeah.
Now I was a little surprised. Like I was thinking about this though, and I mean, you've been down to Bourbon Street a few times too. Like this is only a couple of hours from us.
Yeah, spent a lot of time down there.
Like usually, particularly on weekends, as I remember, they would have a cop car parked on the cross.
So they did this time too.
Okay.
So what this guy did was he waited till they did shift change and were moving the vehicles.
Oh.
And so if you watch, I've seen quite a few of the videos. Some of them are extremely graphic.
Yeah.
But one of the videos that was just released was so we waited until they were doing shift change and the cars were moving, and he speeds down there, like he just times it right. And off to the races he goes.
Because I was curious about that.
Yeah. And they're supposed to have some kind of more permanent style barricade there.
Yeah.
But that they don't have it right now, or something had happened and they were using the cop cars in lieu of.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, I don't remember them ever having concrete barriers or anything up because like during the week
it's
during the
open.
day, during the week, yeah, you can drive down that street.
Yeah, it's normal. Yeah. But they're supposed to have some other type of barricade, and they didn't have it. They had the police cars there barricading it.
I've only seen like the police, like I don't think of them as sawhorses. You know, I don't know what they're actually called, but
Yeah.
that's the kind of setup that it is. That
But something like that, you just drive through that.
oh yeah, sure.
So
I mean, it would create some drag.
yeah, but
Yeah. All right. Well, that's. I was curious about that particular aspect of it. I was like, yeah, usually they have a cop parked right there.
yeah.
Like, how did you get
They
past it?
did, like I say. So
Well, turns out the guy's ex-military, Texas-born Muslim.
yeah.
You know, I haven't seen any real explanation as to why or what his like background is.
Yeah.
In terms of like if his parents are immigrants from where or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything of that nature. I mean, it does seem to be. I mean, I heard that he had a ISIS, which the reporting on the ISIS flag is kind of spotty.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen enough of the videos. It wasn't hanging out the back of the truck anywhere.
Yeah, I read that too.
But they said it was in the truck, I think is what I had heard.
And authorities report that he had made some kind of pledge of loyalty to ISIS online somewhere on Facebook or something, but I haven't seen like screenshots or anything. So
well, and originally they were reporting that he had help, that there were people that were planting bombs and stuff like that. But the more recent reporting I've heard is that it was just him.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I read that he left 2 IEDs and coolers and a couple of blocks apart on Bourbon Street also.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I do have to kind of assume that the reason is the American foreign policy in the Middle East has upset him.
Very easy assumption. Like
in some way.
Yeah.
And of course, like one of the big sticking points in our, like as Americans, relations with pretty much all of both the Arab and the Persian Middle East is our support of Israel's oppression of the Palestinians, which we've just stepped up to 11 in the last year plus.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that that's it. It could have something to do with Syria. It could have something to do with Iraq. It could have something to do with Iran. It could have something to do with anywhere, because we're antagonistic to pretty much every state in the Middle East. And the ones we aren't antagonistic to, we support brutal dictators.
Yeah. So,
which also upsets people.
Yeah.
I mean, the 9/11 hijackers were Saudi and Egyptian. Saudi Arabia and Egypt were allies, but it's because we were, let's say, I think it was Mubarak at the time in Egypt, and of course the Saud family that rules Saudi Arabia, we've supported, and they're not good to their people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. Now the other one, so the guy blows up Elon Musk's truck
in front of a Trump casino in Vegas.
That one I have to assume is politically motivated.
Yeah. And I haven't heard a whole lot more on that one other than more or less what you just laid out.
Yeah.
Like I say. I think he used fireworks and improvised explosives was what I had heard. It wasn't. So, yeah, I don't know. And that guy, both of these guys are dead, by the way. They killed the guy in New Orleans, and I think this guy
killed himself
or died in the truck, something along those lines.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you die in the truck, that was kind of a decision.
Yeah, exactly. And he was the only fatality in the Las Vegas bombing. So the only person who died was him.
Yeah.
Now, it could be an aesthetic attack because that truck is so ugly.
Wow.
I understand why you'd want to blow one of those up.
You say that. I like them, but like I say, I feel like I'm in the minority on this.
Yeah, you're not the only person I know that likes them, but
I don't meet a lot of folks that like them. So
I think it's...
Everybody seems to be with you from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think they're terrible. Terrible looking. But anyway, yeah, the Elon Musk truck in front of the Trump Tower, I assume that that's politically motivated.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's some interesting things going on, especially since they're both former military.
Yeah.
And okay, so the first book I read entirely in 2025.
All right.
I've actually finished 2 books in 2025, but one of them I started in 2024.
So we counting that or no?
Oh, it counts.
It counts. Okay.
I mean, I didn't count it on 2024. It's got to go in the one year or the other. So I figure when I finish it is when it counts.
Okay.
I mean, I've got a book sitting next to my bed that I've been reading bit by bit for 4 years, collection of short stories from Anton Chekhov.
Yeah.
And it's been sitting next to my bed for a long time. It'll count when it's done.
Fair enough.
So, but the one that I read after I finished Mearsheimer's book was Report from Iron Mountain, which is, man, this is a weird thing. So it was released in the 60s. Supposedly it's a leak from a prominent professor that was asked to serve on this government panel to assess the prospects of a lasting peace and what that would mean and so forth in the late 60s, or mid 60s, I guess, because they were thinking that this was a possibility at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, a little did they know.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, I think that is a claptrap. That's not what it is. I mean, I read the thing. It reads like somebody of mediocre intelligence trying to write like somebody who's really smart.
Yeah.
Like their idea of what the way an intellectual would write. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it feels intentionally obfuscatory. It's like got like phrase after phrase after phrase, like sub phrases in these sentences. They're difficult to read. It is incredibly short on actual fact.
Yeah.
They, refer to various studies and statistics and so forth, but they don't really cite very many of them. The things that are cited are like quotes from politicians and so on. This is what I think it actually is.
All right.
I think it's actually a report fabricated by a bunch of hawks, either government hawks or like military hawks, giving an excuse for why they should continue to receive funding.
Okay. Yeah.
Or continue funding the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But the premise is that they had a group of intellectuals that got together to assess the prospects for peace. And what they determined was that war is an essential part of our social structure.
Yeah.
And that we can't really do without it.
Yeah.
Like that war is so important to our society that our society would collapse if we suddenly found ourselves in a peaceful world.
Man, just think about that for a minute. Like, just how crazy that assumption is. Like,
yeah. And so then they're trying to address all the various roles that war fills in society and proposing solutions for what could take its place.
Yeah.
If we didn't have war to do it. And kind of subtly warning that we really should continue war because that's the easiest way to do all this.
That seems like the best way to go, right?
Yeah, it's worked so far.
That's the best way to keep a peaceful society is to keep it at war.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, I've often said that you can't maintain a moral society in a constant state of war.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot of that, actually.
Yeah, I think you can look around and find that pretty easily.
Yeah. But, they're talking about the economic aspects, the science aspects, the sociological aspects of it. Some of it's, in terms of the content, like some of it is kind of interesting, although terrifying in a lot of ways too. But, I don't know. There's just some things that come up in there that you would never hear somebody that was a leader in their field say.
Okay, yeah.
Like, so the economics part of it, they're like, well, we have to have some kind of arbitrary waste in the economy that the government can control and is outside of the market system, because that's the only way that we can keep the economy stable. Which that's some Federal Reserve kind of thinking right there.
Sounds like that's a drain on the economy.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
there's
by
no
all definitions.
there's
like,
no faith that the market economy could take up the slack in other ways. And while I agree that there would be some shifting,
well, there would be adjustments.
yeah. I mean, it would be just like if you came up with a new technology that eliminated a huge percentage of the workforce for some, or the necessity of a huge percentage of the workforce for some industry. Like, those people had to find new places, but on the whole, it generates wealth because now those people's efforts, that resource can be applied to something else where it's needed more.
Yeah.
And, so not having to build things so that we can blow them up halfway around the world, on the whole, would generate wealth.
Absolutely.
And it may take some time, but this is something that happens. But they're talking about it in that, like, a market system run amok needs a huge aspect of it to be outside of the market to cool things off or heat things up as necessary arbitrarily based on the government's decision of when it needs to happen.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they're saying with that.
Yeah.
There was another thing about science in there that, war drives the development of new technology, and that if we didn't have war, we'd answer all our existing questions in just a couple of decades, and then what would we do? Like, no scientist would ever say that. No scientist thinks that we're going to run out of questions to ask.
Can you imagine? Like, I can't even fathom thinking that way. Like, if we answered, like, I mean, that's, for one, that would be like the dream, right?
Yeah, you would. Yeah, you would think that. So, but then all those people would be out of work, Gary.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't even understand where they're coming from with that. Even in the 60s, I mean, there was a period of time that I think that there was this, like, kind of popular idea that we would answer all the questions at some point.
Yeah.
In the not too distant future, but I think we were past that in the 60s.
Right.
I could be wrong. I mean,
I don't know, but
it still seems odd.
just
Like,
the
I can't,
idea of it just seems insane to me.
I can't imagine a group of true intellectuals coming to that conclusion.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that.
And then, they're talking about art. Like, all this art is based around war and war society from all of history and so forth. And we would just only have symbol-less, meaningless art, but maybe that's okay. But, maybe that can fill in. And I can only assume that they're talking about, like, Rothko.
We've got to have war to save art.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
But, one of them was this sociological thing, like, okay, well, what do we do with the malcontents then?
Yeah.
Because right now, you have young men that are disaffected or whatever. You can put them in the military and direct them towards something. And after they're done with the military, most of them become, like,
pretty good
productive
citizens.
members of society, which they weren't before. And so what do you do with these people? And, like, one of the suggestions is make them the enemy.
Yeah.
Like, apparently, we need an enemy for a functioning, cohesive society. That's kind of the conclusion.
Yeah.
And so why don't we make these disaffected youths the enemy?
Yeah.
So, focus on the internal problems and make those people the enemy. And, like, I don't know.
See, that's part of my fear is just like what if we did ever come to a peace, kind of like the premise of this little book here, like, my next immediate fear is the fear that I actually still have right now, is that all of those mechanisms will be turned against the people.
Yeah.
And just kind of like what you're saying, like, all of it, instead of us sending soldiers off to war in Iraq or wherever it is, we send them to go fix Chicago or something of that nature,
right. Yeah.
And that's, I still worry about that now. I mean, all of this kind of harpens back to the terrorism thing, because that's my biggest
Domestic terrorism.
Exactly. It's very easily, we've already seen this ratchet up once, is that become the new enemy, and it doesn't do anything but give government more power. Because the truth is...
So essentially what, in this case, in the context of this book, what they would be talking about is shifting military into law enforcement to fight your own people instead of fighting foreigners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's not the society that I want to live in.
But that is one of the proposals in this book.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it would have to be, because it's a very logical line to draw.
And we've seen over the last many years them starting to make antagonists out of former military people.
Yeah.
Like, you see it over and over again. They talk about, do we have to take the guns away from the retired military guys? And, we have to worry about mental health in the military people. And, like, the military people are the most capable of launching a terrorist attack, and so on and so on and so on. Like, this is a discussion that has been in the, the zeitgeist or whatever for many years now.
Exactly.
Without ever considering the possibility that they wouldn't be a problem if they hadn't been sent overseas to kill people.
Yeah, exactly. Been completely desensitized to some of the stuff.
And so, like, some of the other things that they talk about, though, is, all right, well, maybe we can waste money like we do on the military into some other industry. And they use space. Yeah. They're like, oh, well, we can waste money into space exploration. We can just set goals that we could never achieve and waste tremendous amounts of money in that way. And that could even supply maybe the enemy that we're looking for. We could create an extraterrestrial threat, to bring people together.
Yeah.
And then one of the big ones that they talk about is some kind of climate crisis.
Yeah.
Now, remember, this is written in the mid-1960s.
Right.
And like I said, I think it was a leak by a group of mediocre minds just trying to justify defense spending.
Yeah.
And sour the American public on the idea of a peaceful society.
Right.
Or sour government officials on the idea of a peaceful society.
I think that's really more what it would be geared towards.
Well, I mean, in the end, what I think it's really about is maintaining the power and control of government. Yeah. All these things in the end, that's really what they have as their purpose. They don't have as their purpose, like, keeping a functioning society. What they have as their purpose, even though that's what they say.
They fear that the fear is that society can actually function without government.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what they're afraid of. And they can't ever let you see that.
Yeah.
They can't let you see that, oh, well, we're really not that important, or we're really not that needed.
Yeah. If we can't get people scared or something, then what incentive do they have to listen to our ridiculous dictates?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what they're really trying to answer is true. But they talk about they talk about it as a pollution crisis.
Yeah.
That's something that could create this kind of like superordinate level of government that we need everybody to subscribe to, something like the Paris Accords.
Yeah.
But a government body that
can actually enforce it. Yeah.
I don't know. It was, I think I struggled when I put it in my list, because now I'm keeping a list of finished books.
Yeah.
Whether I should put it as fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah.
Because the premise, like what it's sold as, seems to me to be clearly not the case.
Yeah.
That part seems to be a fiction.
Yeah.
But the proposals in there, I don't think are.
Yeah.
I think it's a legitimate attempt by some group, and it may or may not be connected to government, but I bet it is.
Yeah.
To find ways to keep power over your citizenry.
Yeah.
If war were to disappear.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not doing anytime soon.
No.
I found it interesting.
Definitely some stuff to munch on in there from what I can glean.
Yeah, I can't remember if there was any. I don't think that they had anything in there about pandemics. I think it might have been mentioned in passing, but it was something that was so short term that it wasn't really a viable solution.
Yeah. Well, because as seen through the last one, people will eventually get wise to
Yeah,
it.
you can only get maybe 2 or 3 years out of it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Then,
So,
that was their problem with space initially too.
oh, really?
It was like, oh well, we might get a couple of decades out of this, but then what?
Yeah. Man, there's so much that can be done as far as space,
Oh, I know.
which is part of the reason that seems
It's like if you actually succeed, then you set a new goal. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, colonize the moon. That'll never happen. Oh man, we succeeded. All right, well, colonize Mars then.
Well, and all of those things can. I mean, anybody.
How
that's
about
watched-
Jupiter?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really where society should be heading anyway. I mean, I've always said that the solution to climate change is we get off this planet. So
Yeah. There was one word that they used in there that really kind of nailed it home for me that this was not what it claimed to be.
Okay.
And they kept using a word like hypothesize and
Yeah.
in the place of hypothesize.
Yeah.
But the word they used was hypothecate.
Oh yeah.
Just a word.
Okay.
But it's like a legally binding pledge that you would make. It would be
Okay.
like if you pledge to give money to your local fire. What's the one that they send out the donation request that's connected to the fire department?
I have no clue.
Oh, or the police department or whatever. I don't know. They're
Like an organization?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know what you're getting at, but I can't think of one.
I can't.
The name of them.
Yeah, there's a big one that's always sending stuff out,
Yeah.
asking for donations to support fire departments or police departments and so on. Anyway, like the FOP, like the
Okay.
Fraternal Order of Police,
Yeah.
something like that. All right. So if you made a pledge of $20 to the Fraternal Order of Police, then you hypothecated $20.
Okay.
But they were using this word in place of hypothesize.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's not the right word, though. And it is possible.
So much that you went and checked?
Yeah, I was like, is this another definition of this that I couldn't
Yeah.
find? Now,
Yeah.
it's not currently. So if
Yeah.
there's some boomers out there that remember the 1960s and people using hypothecate as a synonym to hypothesize, let me know because I'm curious. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, that's the absolute proof in that book that it was
Just bull.
fabricated. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's possible, like words change meanings over time. It's been 50,
Something
60 years.
Yeah.
So maybe, but that one particularly stood out to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I know this word, but that's not where that should go. And the first time I was like, okay, well maybe I'm misreading. Like I kept trying to make the phrase fit.
Yeah.
But then in the next sentence, they made it clear that they were using it as a synonym for hypothesize.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm not misinterpreting this.
Yeah.
They're just using the wrong word.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing I do in my free time. So if you can find a copy of it, and I think that you can probably find a copy online. I hunted and found a physical copy
Yeah.
a year or two ago, and I finally got around to reading it. Oh, and it's got I thought this was interesting. It has a memo page from from the desk of, these kind of things, like
Yeah.
little personalized memo paper.
Yeah.
From some guy at a West Louisiana oil company.
Okay.
Like a small West Louisiana oil company,
Yeah.
wishing Merry Christmas to some people in 1960. Merry Christmas 1968 or whatever, that just like fell out of the binding when I was flipping through it.
That's weird.
Yeah. So I guess it belonged to maybe it was a Christmas gift to somebody in 1968. I'm not really
Apparently,
sure.
May have been. Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. I'm like, well, I'm not losing this. I stuffed it back into the
Right.
into the binder.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was an interesting read.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting and scary.
Yeah, and and when we started talking about the terrorist thing, I started thinking of that too. You know, that the goal is to keep people ill at ease,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
feel like they need the protection of government.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Maybe it's not related at all. It is in my head though.
Well, it is to me too. When you started talking about that, that's the reason I kind of mentioned that to me, these two subjects are very close.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I worry about. The thing I worry about most with terrorism is I'm not worried about being a victim of terrorism. Like I'm not going to live my life that way. I've heard a lot of people the last few days talk about exactly that. Is that, well, you know, I've never liked going out in crowds because of something like this and that. Like that's just, I mean, I don't like going out in crowds, but not because of that.
Yeah.
But I've never been one that wants to live my life that way. And I feel like there's a lot of us out there that are just not going to let this fear take us over.
Yeah. I absolutely refuse to live in fear of some random event.
Yeah, but that is the goal, and I think that if things like this do happen more, that will be, I mean, it'll start working. You know.
You know, I saw. Probably should have pulled the clip. I can't remember what it was from now, but the news talking about or some guy, some expert on the news talking about how dangerous the Russia-Ukraine thing has become because Russia is now waging war in a way that we've never seen before, in that they're doing targeted assassinations of people in Ukraine and things like this. And why would they do this? And I was like, because Ukraine is.
Right.
Ukraine targeted, what's his name, Dugin last year and killed his daughter instead. They just recently had was it Kirillov that they killed? It was a top military guy that they blew up a scooter next to his house and killed him. Yeah. That's why Russia is doing that. Like, I was just blown away that they would talk about Russia using assassinations as a weapon of war and saying, I can't believe that they're actually doing this. We've never done war this way before, without mentioning that this is how Ukraine is waging this war.
Right.
And the idea that Russia would respond in kind
should be common sense.
Yeah. And not only that, what was one of Donald Trump's very last acts as president?
Oh, I don't know.
It was the Soleimani assassination.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well,
he hit a top Iranian National Guard general, Quds Force general.
That's right.
In Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea that Russia is doing something completely inconceivable and new by assassinating people as part of their war plans is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, it is the reason I worry more about the terrorism too, is because going into 4 years of Trump, which, like I say, I mean, I have to say I supported. The end of it I didn't was the ramping up in the Middle East. And by the picks that he's made as far as his cabinet goes, like, we're going to be more involved. We're as much or more involved in the Middle East than we already are. And that's only a recipe for more terrorism.
I worry about the Iran thing.
Yeah.
That's the part that I really worry about.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that we'll end up at war with Iran. Because there are people that really want it. And there's some people that have convinced Trump that they're a real problem. Now, at the same time, Trump, a couple of times in his first term, kind of short-circuited a potential war with Iran.
Yeah.
So, maybe not. But
I don't think Trump, the man, really wants a war with much of anybody. Yeah. Now he ain't afraid.
China.
He ain't afraid to talk tough. I don't think he wants war with China either.
Yeah.
But you have to separate some of his language, because he's always going to talk tough, because that's how he believes you get the better deal. That's just the way his mind works. Is the more the bigger I talk, the more the more brutal I am. At the end of the day, that's going to get me the better deal when we come to the negotiating table. So.
Yeah. So I said that I just finished Mearsheimer's book. let me read this little bit he has about. So the last chapter of his book, The Tragedy of Great Power Conflict, is actually the title of the chapter is "Can China Rise Peacefully?"
Okay.
And his answer is probably not.
Yeah. Well.
And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And the reason is because the idea of this offensive realism, his theory of international politics, is that the goal of every power is to become a regional hegemon, meaning that there are no other great powers in their sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Which the only one that exists or really has existed is the United States.
Yeah, because, I mean, we got this part of the world on lock.
Yeah, our entire hemisphere, there's nobody that can come close to challenging us.
Yeah.
We are absolute undisputed hegemon of the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
That's never existed in Europe. There's always been at least two other great powers.
Yeah.
Including, you might say, the Cold War, where the U.S. was a great power in Europe.
Well, yeah.
And the same is true for Asia.
Yeah.
All right, so but the idea is that any powerful country is going to try to become a regional hegemon, and any country that's a regional hegemon is going to do everything it can to prevent any other power rising as a regional hegemon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so anyway, this is what he's talking about, the way things will go with China, like how the U.S. will react to the rise of China, and some of the signs that there's a real security conflict going on.
Okay.
So I'm going to read this paragraph because I thought this was interesting. He says, Beijing and Washington can also be expected to put travel restrictions on visitors from their rival, as the Soviet Union and the United States did during the Cold War. We would furthermore anticipate seeing the United States bar Chinese students from studying subjects at American university that have direct relevance for the development of weapons and other technologies that might affect the balance of power between the two countries. In related moves, both countries would surely place selected export controls on goods and services that have a significant national security dimension. The likely model here the rest of it's just like historical references to this kind of thing. But we're seeing all of that right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that makes me nervous.
Yeah. I mean, there's reason to be concerned that, especially with Trump, he's always going to, like I say, the bolstering, what the word I'm looking for, blustering.
Blustering?
Yeah, blustering is the word I'm looking for. Is always going to be a danger with Trump because he seems to, in his last presidency, know how to use it and pull it back. But you always worry that he ends up in an escalating thing with another country that can't be pulled back from.
Yeah.
And he's too much of a big head to pull back. The other guy's always got to be the first to do it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a danger with Trump, and especially with the China thing, because he's got, going back to the 80s, that's something he's always talked about is China.
Yeah, and what we always have to worry about with the government is that the government is a hell of a lot more interested in maintaining its own place than any of us.
Well, yeah.
So the idea of a trade war with China would be terrible for the American working man.
Oh, yeah.
But our government doesn't really care about that. They just want to make sure that they're the one big power in the world.
Yeah.
And however many of their own citizens they have to kill to maintain that, they're really just not concerned about.
Yeah. And if you need any evidence of that, just look at the military in general and how it's ran.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to kind of say about the terrorism aspect is we really kind of take freedom for granted in this country. It's something all of us have had for all of our life. And I just, I remember, and a lot of people listening to this podcast may not, and a lot may, but I remember the aftermath of 9/11 and how, the government just got bigger and more control and the surveillance state. And we could be heading for another one of these ramp ups.
Yeah. I was about to say, we never came out of the first one. No. We're just adding additional layers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Like we just need to be
What,
mindful.
your last name's Lee? No, you can't study engineering in this country.
Yeah. It's definitely a worry, and it's something. I mean, we do as a people have control over this. Like the reason that Bush was able to do everything he did in his 2 terms was because we
It was a compliant public.
He had the people behind him.
Yeah.
And Dave Smith played the Ron Paul Giuliani on his last podcast, and like listening back through that, like. I mean, I lived through that. Like, I remember. And listening to the crowd just going wild for Giuliani. Like, I mean, you listen to it now and you're like, it's like Bizarro world, but we can be back there pretty quick.
Yeah. I think we're still there, actually.
Well, we're not that far from there.
I think if you had that same exchange in front of the American public today, that people would be cheering Giuliani again.
You may be right. I mean, I'd like to think that's not true. But I'm, we all live in our echo chambers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, but but the big point I want to drive home is like, we as a people have the control over this. Like if they try to push this stuff through and we push against it enough, it can be stopped.
Yeah.
But it takes a good majority,
It doesn't take even a good majority, actually. It just takes a vocal minority.
Exactly. But it's got to be there, and it's like I say. So,
well, first off, I want to say congratulations. You managed to continue talking into the microphone while I went and grabbed this book. I think that's the first time ever. We've been doing this podcast since 2016.
Yeah. I did it.
Well done.
You got up from the seat, and I didn't stop talking.
Yep, that's a step forward. I feel like you can maybe do that again some other time in the future.
Maybe.
So I just wanted to say I'm proud of you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. I try.
So just in the last, I don't know, we've got 10 or 15 minutes maybe here. And we don't have to fill all that time, certainly. But I just want to talk, I think it's a requirement that every podcast, at least political podcast, has to do a review of the previous year when a new year starts.
All right.
And talk about the most significant event, at least in our opinions.
Yeah. Do you really think the last year had one?
A most significant event? That's tough.
Yeah, right.
But nothing really happened.
Yeah, a lot happened that year. Like when historians write the year 2024, that's going to be like a couple of chapters.
Yeah. It'll be fewer chapters than 2020, though.
Well, yeah. You think so?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let's start with you because you already told me what.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was tough between Biden just imploding in the debate and the Trump assassination. And I actually kind of go more towards the Trump assassination because I think it was at least
first or the second one.
The first one, the big
the one that happened on TV.
Yeah. The one that if it had went through, would have been live on TV.
Yeah, everybody would have seen the ex-president get his head blown off on television.
Yeah. And I think that is the most significant because I feel like that, and I said it at the time, like that solidified his reelection. Yeah. I still think he probably would have got it either way, but I think it was signed, sealed, and done from there forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason, like I say, and it is kind of tough because with the, as far as with the debate debacle, I mean, it's once having Biden drop out was big too, because Trump was just going to roll Biden, and all the polls showed it. So I don't know, but it's between those two for me, though.
Okay. For me, it is the aftermath of that.
Okay.
For me, it is the selection of Kamala Harris to replace Biden, and that whole process completely outside
of the electorate.
Yeah. Or of the primary system,
people that were screeching about democracy, not picking their candidate through democracy.
Yeah, completely ignoring. I think it made clear that at least the Democrat primary is a farce.
Yeah.
And
it has been for a long time.
Well, I mean, I agree. Obviously, they kept burning out of it in 2016 and 2020 for that matter.
Yeah.
But I think that the just elite Democrat selection of their candidate is one of the more significant events in American political history.
Yeah. Well, that selection also solidified Trump gonna win.
Well, I mean, we thought that it was most likely that he would win, but I think that we both conceded that there was a real possibility that Kamala would win that election.
The only reason I would have said that Kamala would have won is if it was stolen.
Yeah. Well, okay. I don't agree with that, but I think that it's very telling that part though is very telling also that the Democrat electorate just got on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. The person that we selected that you told us was fine turns out isn't. Yeah. And so you've just replaced him with somebody else without any say-so from us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just off to the races we go.
Yeah. I mean, Kamala earned or was donated the most money, I think, of any campaign in history.
I think I remember hearing that. Yeah.
And but I think just the selection of that candidate just was such a display of what a farce the whole thing is.
Yeah.
That nobody cares what you think.
Yeah. Right.
Like there are people that are at high levels of whatever that are really making these decisions, and you just kind of have to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I think that what is going to play out as the most significant event in terms of like world history out of 2024 was the overthrow of Assad.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's going to reverberate for a while. I think that that's going to have a lot of secondary effects across the Middle East, and for American foreign policy.
You think it's going to spring democracy?
No.
Being facetious.
No, I don't.
But the fact that you had to think about it for a minute kind of...
I was trying to figure out if I needed to respond to that seriously or not. But I think that event, I think people aren't going to pay a whole lot of attention to that, but I think that that's actually going to be
huge.
Very momentous in terms of the future of the Middle East and American foreign policy and international relations generally.
Yeah.
But I think that in terms of political, like front of the mind American events, I think that the appointment of Kamala Harris as the Democrat nominee is a real significant and kind of point-turning event in U.S. politics.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely agree.
I mean, I think like some of the... I think the election of Donald Trump is significant, actually, too.
Oh, it's to me, it's the most significant. Like I say,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the reason I picked between the assassination and the debate was because those two events led to Trump being elected president.
So you think that was really the most significant?
I guess at the end of the day, I just changed my own mind, and but I do think that was the most significant, Trump being elected.
Yeah.
I think. Because it's just such a tidal wave.
I'm interested to see how that affects the future. I don't think there are a lot of people out there talking about that this is the end of the culture war, and I think it's the beginning.
Well, it was so hot during his first term, but it just doesn't feel that way now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and something else, like Trump has just been normalized. Like, I mean, he's been this way pretty much through this election. Like, he's not radioactive anymore, and it's just, he's normalized. And I don't...
People can only be outraged for so long.
Well, and we had said that the whole way through his first term. It was like, how much can... Well, and they maintained it way longer than I thought it could be maintained. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, they maintained it like solidly through the first term and then through a lot of Biden's term.
Yeah.
I mean, it slowly kind of dissipated through Biden's term. And a big reason that it did dissipate was because Biden was just so bad. that even Democrats are sitting here looking like, dude, things are worse and worse and worse the whole way through his term. Now us as libertarians, we kind of know that some of that was Biden and some of it was just like basic economics.
Yeah.
But your average voter doesn't know any of that. They just know that things are getting worse and worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it started with Trump's policies, but Biden ramped them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, the COVID debacle was a huge part of that too.
Yeah.
In terms of the economics aspect. But yeah, I guess what I'm thinking of is like kind of the woke stuff.
Yeah. I just feel like it hit its peak, and I feel like it's on its decline now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's going anywhere. I think that this is where they, I think what we've seen so far is just kind of the initial volleys, and now it's entrenched, and they're going to really fight from here.
You may be right.
I hope not. I mean, a friend of mine was telling me, this was a while back, this is maybe a year ago, that she met a guy sitting next to her on a plane, and she started talking to him, and she noticed that he had a wedding ring, and she asked him about his partner.
Yeah. Use the word partner.
Partner.
Yeah.
And it turned out that he was gay, and so it was his husband that he had the ring for.
Yeah.
And she was saying, "Oh, I'm so glad that I used that word instead of asking him about his wife or something." And assuming whatever, like, I feel I'm really glad that I used that word. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to upset him. I was like, he would have no right to be upset about that.
Yeah.
I was like, 98% of people are heterosexual.
Even
like, if he wants to get mad at you because you used a term that applies to 49 out of 50 or more situations, then that's his hang up, not yours. It's like somebody asking me, and in fact, libertarians are roughly the same percentage of the population as homosexuals.
Oh man, there's not a lot of us. Well, I just know from my personal experience in life that if I run into a libertarian, like that's a special moment.
Yeah. It would be like me getting upset if somebody asked me if I was a Republican or a Democrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty safe bet that I'm going to be one or the other. And it would be ridiculous of me to get upset about them not including libertarian in their question.
In the question, yeah. Or asking it in a way to leave it open or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Well, to me, it's just an easy correction. Like, I mean, if she had asked about his wife or something like that, like, it's an easy correction. Be like, oh no, I'm blah 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 blah, and you just correct it. Like, and that's
I'm gay. It's my husband. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Exactly.
Like, it's just not. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But we do live in a society that likes to work things up into something that should be nothing.
Yeah.
And I work with the public. I see it day in, day out. Like there are a lot of people that just kind of wander around looking for that little moment, for that little gotcha, for whatever it is.
Yeah. It's the victimhood Ponzi scheme.
It really is. Yeah. Like, it's a mess. It's something we got to work out as a society. Get better people.
Well, I mean, I do see some light in terms of the trans thing.
Yeah.
I think that we're starting to see, like with the Cass report coming out last year and things like that it's harder to make the claim that, it's the science in this. Like if you're making a scientific argument, gender's a binary.
Yeah. Right.
Like if you're talking about biology, there's XX or XY and a few like really rare genetic defects.
Yeah.
But that covers very few of the trans people out there. Yeah. And so I think that we're running into a situation where at least that might get rolled back a little bit.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that it would get rolled back a little bit, not really because the science isn't on their side, but because it became such a losing policy for the Democrats.
Well, that's really what it boils down to, is society is not as far along on that one as the Democrats particularly would like to think. Their own party isn't as far along on that as they think that they are.
Yeah.
So, and that's a positive, obviously. So,
but I mean, I think that there's hope for the future, but there's tripwires out there.
yeah.
You know, if Trump is like, my real hope here is that Trump was very proud of that he was the first president in decades not to start a new war.
Yeah.
And that I hope that he goes into his term with that same kind of attitude. Like, I'm going to have 2 terms and be the only president
that
in a century, essentially, that didn't start a new war.
Well, I think that, I mean, he's definitely looking for legacy in this last term. And I think that's part of what he wants it to be.
Yeah.
I hope he's successful at it. I mean, time will tell. His appointments don't help.
Yeah.
So,
well, some of them don't. Some of them do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag, but there's...
I mean, Tulsi's not going to be pushing him for war.
Well, no, obviously not, yeah. But you got Marco Rubio there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even he's kind of... He's mellowed a little.
Yeah.
Not a lot. But a little.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be another interesting term.
Yeah.
And it should be entertaining, I suppose, if nothing else.
It'll always be entertaining with Trump there.
I'm kind of curious if they'll be able to get that hysteria about him built up again once he's back in office.
I mean,
I wonder if this is the calm before the storm, you know?
And you may be right, but I don't see it. I don't see them being able to rile and gin it up.
Yeah.
The same way as they did last time. It goes to, like, I mean, the moment's already kind of passed.
Yeah, he's kind of a known quantity now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, he's maybe a little... He might be a loose cannon, but he's not...
You will always have a handful of talking heads that heads are going to explode over him, but you have those on the right too. So
that's true.
And you'll always have your people out there that can just never accept that, you know, he is what he is and nothing more. Mm-hmm. But I mean, other than that, I think those are all fringes.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see.
You still have people out there that are like, well, this is the last election we'll ever had. He won't give up office.
Yeah, I mean, there's still people out there saying that right now. Yeah.
4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
He hasn't been president the last 4 years. He did leave office.
You will have this and for the record, as long as I can go back and remember, we've had that said about presidents at the end of their term every time. I remember them talking about that with Clinton, that Clinton was going to do. I remember very well at the time that, I mean, it was fringes, but it was out there that he's going to declare martial law and take over and not leave office. Like, I mean, that's a tale as old as time, as far as I'm concerned.
We'll have a Zelensky on our hands.
Yeah, I mean, and then you have places out there that are currently doing that now.
Yeah.
Which goes back to my terrorism point that I'd like to kind of just close out on one more time because I want to drive it home that much, is that there are countries all over this planet that are ruled through dictators like China, the way they monitor their people and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The technology exists. It can happen here.
Yeah.
Like, we have got to be vigilant against this. It's just I cannot stress it enough, man. It's my biggest fear.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
yeah. Stop opening your phone with your face.
I grabbed my wife's phone the other day, and she's like, "Do you know my passcode?" I was like, "It's your face, right?" She was like, "Well, it has a passcode too." Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, whatever.
All right. Well, yeah, then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
I would like to kind of tease for the next episode. I think, so we kind of, at the end of this one, we did kind of the year in review or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'd like to maybe take the last bit of the next episode to talk about where the future of the Libertarian Party and where we think what the next few years kind of mean for us as libertarians.
Okay.
I don't want to do a whole podcast on it because I don't think it deserves it. But I think that we should have that discussion and kind of
Okay.
where do we think that our party is going? Because there's a lot of questions about it. It's not like that's not a simple answer. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I think that would have had a fairly simple answer. It does not anymore.
Yeah.
So
Okay. That's
I think
fair.
that's a good teaser for the next week.
Sure.
So.
For the 2% of the population, that's
yeah, we're not going to spend the whole podcast on you.
1 out of every 50 of our listeners will be interested in that.
I think it's a higher percentage of that than that.
That's why we're going
to this podcast.
We're going to put it at the end.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. So
next week we should be good, at least on my end.
Yeah, I feel like I have a bunch of things next week, but I am not going out of town, as it turns out. So yeah, should be good.
Yep, I think so.
All right, cool. Well, we expect to be back next week. Of course, we said that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a bit of a loss. So,
but holidays,
Yeah. And we didn't have a lot of that last year, so we
family obligations and
the plague
work
was
obligations
going around. So.
Gary had the plague.
I did. It was rough.
Yeah.
And for the record, I worked through having the plague. So,
Gary was a super spreader.
You heard that term, super spreader? That was me.
Yeah.
So
you're a terrible person.
I can't help it.
Killing grandma all over the place.
All over the place.
Everybody's grandma. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back next week. And in the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean. Like and share, comment, subscribe, leave reviews, direct messages. You can always email me at michael@thelibertymike.com. That's all of the stuff, right?
I feel like it. I feel like that's enough.
That's most of the stuff, if not all of the stuff.
Yeah.
Not setting up Rumble unless somebody out there volunteers to do that, because I've got enough.
Yeah.
I also have a job,
right.
So
where you get paid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can do something about that this year. We say that every year, though.
Yeah.
Like, this year we'll start the value for value setup. We'll start accepting donations and so forth, and it just keeps not happening.
Yeah.
Which that is probably my fault. I keep meaning to talk to my accountant about how I would do that properly.
When I think of the tax implications of that, I just feel like, oh man, maybe it's not worth it.
We could be a non-profit.
Oh yeah.
Well. Anyway, yeah, I had to address that with somebody else some other time.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back next week when we finally get this right. And in the meantime, try to stay free.
Life's short, live free.
Ciao.
Later.